version of the planning commission. At this time, I'd like you to turn your phones off or put them in happy mode, and we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation. Again, we don't have clergy, so if somebody would like to get up to the podium and give the invocation, please feel free. Ready? Begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Who's going to do it? You want to do it, or DJ? I don't. You want to do it?
Let's bow our heads. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening to give thanks. Thanks for all of our blessings. And thanks for your watch over this community. We ask that you would be with us. We ask that you would be with this commission, that you would pour your wisdom upon them in their decisions and actions. Lord, Heavenly Father, bless our community, keep us safe, and watch over us. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Next time, turn the mic on. It should be on. No.
No?
It's okay. Who's?
Madam Secretary, would you please roll call us in?
Commissioner Trumbull,
Here.
Commissioner Macedonio,
Here.
Commissioner Hogan,
Here.
Vice Chair Ellis. Here. Chair Creighton.
Here. All right, at this time, I'd like a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
I'll make that motion that we adopt tonight's agenda.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Planning Secretary, are there any reports or late communications?
There are none.
Thank you very much. At this time, we'll move on to public business from the floor. Members of the public are welcome to address the Planning Commission only on those items that are not on tonight's agenda. Each member of the public will be given 3 minutes to speak. If anybody would like to, if anybody has anything to say, please.
Karen Macedonio, resident. Commissioner Creighton, Vice Chair Elms, the rest of you guys. I want to know why we're not getting minutes at every meeting of the prior meeting. We were doing so good. We even got a compliment from somebody else in the room that said they were the best minutes he'd ever seen. And all of a sudden, we're not doing them again. And I think that this is an enormous disservice to the community because we don't get a chance to look at the minutes, go back to the recording, see what's there, and have any kind of a searchable piece of document that can tell us what we said. And building on that, this month, on October 10th, we had a directors meeting. And it was a really interesting meeting where we talked about 160 acres, and it ended up really, really positive. But I want to know how the commission knows about it, and how the public knows about it, and how that information is passed on to our council. Because one of the statements made by one of the principals in this meeting was, okay, fine, if this is what we have to do to get up and operating, we'll do it, we'll work with you. But I guarantee you, I will come back and hold the city accountable that everybody plays by the same rules. And my question is, how can we play by the same rules if we don't have written information and minutes that we all know where we are? So I respectfully ask that the commission direct the staff that minutes need to be provided at every meeting, and that documents from the directors meeting need to pass upwards to the commission so the commission can pass them in the minutes to the council. Thank you.
You got it?
Yeah, so the minutes are done in draft form. We decided not to have them approved at this meeting because it's a special planning commission meeting. They will be approved at the next one.
Okay, so just because you're the one that told me on the phone, it's the 9-3 minutes that were pulled from the 10-1 meeting. So we have 9 3-minutes that are missing, we have 10 1-minutes that are missing, and we won't have the next set of minutes until November. That's 60 days. I believe that's illegal.
Oh, we'll have to get back to you on that.
Getting to be a good politician, Sean. We'll get back to you on that.
Good evening, Chairman Creighton and planning commissioners. I'm going to make a couple brief comments, just sort of an overview of some things I've observed. I think it'll be helpful. Over a period of years, I've brought testimony to this commission and to council that we have to change as a city. We have to look at our results and actually do things that will improve our results for the future sustainability. That includes real estate and includes forward planning. And so I've seen over the past couple of years a lot of effort, a lot of cohesion. I want to feed it back to you. There was a long discussion about having a workshop, and there was a workshop, and it was, in my view, maybe others' view, perhaps one of the most beneficial workshops we'd seen. I think there was sort of hesitation or just pause, like, is this going to be any good? And that kind of went away, and it was just very effective. And so I want to feed that back to you that I observed that as a member of the public. I observed that as a real estate developer. I observed that as a consultant, saying, wow, we're somewhere now together. We're cohesive. And I haven't seen that in my view for a period of time, so I appreciate that. I also want you to know that I'm in touch with folks in the industry, the development industry, the cannabis industry as well. And they are saying things to me that are different, that they are recognizing California City now as a place that is interested in fast track, in streamlining, in issuing permits. That has also changed. One is a very prominent fellow who has done more cannabis developments in the Coachella Valley. He spearheads. He's the president of the Coachella Valley Growers Association. He's a board member of Newell. He's very prominent. California City is being mentioned now as a place to go. That is proactive. And so these are positive changes that we need to be encouraged by. And we can continue to do this work. Tonight you have a couple items, or maybe one item about future planning, so I'll defer to that. But I want you to know that your efforts, your cohesion, your collaboration, and your assertiveness is meaningful. It's making a difference. And so I appreciate you very much. I'm going to hold up this. What I have is a general plan map that does now need to be updated because there's been many updates. I know Sean has a new general plan document, but however, for folks that don't have those updates, I think we need to make these available online if they're not already online in some form that people can identify the zone changes in the general plan amendments. Tonight I'll defer again to some additional planning, and so I'll speak with you then, but I have some documents I'll share with you in a little bit. And make some suggestions as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, moving on. There are no items on the consent calendar, as was pointed out by one of our community members. So we'll pass that one. Tonight's meeting, we have 2 public hearings and 1 discussion item. So on public hearing number 1, the item is Development Agreement SPR 18-38. This hearing is now open, and let's hear the staff report.
So upon evaluation of the draft agreement between the City of California City and Teal Farms for APN 225-09109, it's concluded by the City Attorney and City Manager Office. There is no equitable agreement to the city. Therefore, this planning staff recommends this item be continued to the November 19th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. This will allow time for planning staff to work with the developer to come up with an equitable agreement that would benefit both the developer and the city.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any questions on this item?
I have none. Just one on who is this Tilla Farms?
At Teal.
The Teal
Teal?
Farms.
They're one of the,
Yeah, no, but I mean, do they have a human being name to them?
So yes, they're financed by two men out of San Diego. We've worked close with them in the SPR process, and then Raj is the person on scene here. So they've been,
So
giving
Raj
direction
and
to
two
Raj.
other guys?
yes,
He was the consultant.
Raj is the consultant.
Hmm?
Samir is the engineer, right?
No, Agapito.
That's that company working out there by the railroad tracks.
Right, no, I got that part, I just didn't know who they were. I still probably really don't know who they are, I know who Raj is, that's it.
Richard, I can take you out there.
No, I don't.
I can take you out.
Okay.
I drive by it all the time, thank you though, I appreciate the offer.
Is this the one?
Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications regarding this item?
There are none.
Okay. All right, at this time, I'm going to open it up for public testimony. If anybody would like to speak on this item, you have 3 minutes and no do-overs.
Hello, Keith Mills, I just have a question. I believe that's the property that was going to have a well put in. Did they find water?
Yes,
And they're working on getting pumps and all that?
pumps in, it's pumping water.
That's all I had.
Yeah, they had a really clean drilling rig, extremely clean, as opposed to the one that was a little further east. It was a mess.
On the one down the block?
Yeah,
On the
well, no,
right-hand side?
no, the one on Cal City Boulevard that's a little closer to us,
Yeah.
to the main community.
A mile or so down.
Yeah, they had stuff all over the place. This other company they had their stuff together. But yeah,
Okay. So the other one is, being abandoned or they're gonna do something different or?
they found water at about 800, 900 feet.
Okay, so they're still gonna go forward, at least we think they will.
I don't know what they're waiting for, but yeah, I believe they are.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Keith.
DJ Toohey again, briefly, I was appointed to the Economic Development Corporation as the vice president. I also sit on the Economic Development Committee for Kern County through KernTax. I've sat in many of the SDRs. I've been aware of development agreements for years. In fact, I made mention to former city managers that the development agreements are essential to these future developments when he didn't even know what they were. And so I made the suggestion to Sean a few minutes ago, it would be beneficial to have the opportunity to see the negotiations from an economic development perspective. That may be confidential, but however, if you can't really serve the city as an economic development official, if you're not involved. So having said that, it's just something I bring to your attention. If it's meaningful to the city to have a neutral party and someone who has some experience in economic development, I would be available to participate. Thank you for your time. You have a question?
Yes, is the EDC still functioning?
I'm not the president, I don't control it. I'm aware that the city has not funded it. I'm aware that
Is that yes or no?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Okay, if you don't know, that's
I think
okay.
you'd have to ask.
I just wanted to ask
I
you,
don't
because
know.
you say you're the vice president of the EDC.
I am, I was, am. I'm answering what I can.
No, I get it, I'm not trying
We're
to
not
be,
trying to laugh at you, but it's
it's just, if it doesn't exist anymore because it hasn't been funded and there's never been a meeting for the last, I don't know how long, maybe it's no
I
longer.
think that's a really good question for the city manager, because the former city manager defunded the EDC.
Right,
I had nothing to do with that.
no, I know you didn't, I wasn't accusing you of that.
Imagine at a time that we have more businesses coming to town in the history of the city.
It'd be a
It
good time
would
to
seem
start it
that-
up again.
It could be a
It
real
was a
good,
great concern to me because we were actually interacting with many of the businesses. Well, I can say I was on behalf of the city. So at this point, I do sit on the committee for Kern County, KernTax. Thank you.
okay, thank you, DJ.
all right. Can I get a motion to close public testimony?
I'll make the motion we close the public testimony.
Second, anybody?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public testimony is closed. At this time, I think it's appropriate to make a motion to continue this item on 19 November. So if I could get that motion, please.
I'd like to make a motion to continue this on November 19th.
I'll second that.
Do we need a roll call? Or can we just do a voice vote?
No money involved.
Let's do a roll call.
Commissioner Trumbull,
Yes.
Commissioner Macedonia,
Yes,
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Vice Chair Elm,
Yes.
Chair Creighton.
Yes. So moved. Public hearing number 2, Development Agreement SPR 18-17. Public hearing is now open. Staff,
So this is actually gonna be the same as the previous, but to get out ahead, this, development is for Sunpoint Capital, and that is operating at the end of the west runway at the airport currently. And that said, upon evaluation of the draft development agreement between the City of California City and Sunpoint Capital LLC for APN 30206-203, it's concluded by the city attorney and city manager office that there's no equitable agreement to the city. Therefore, planning staff recommends this item be continued to the November 19th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. This will allow time for planning staff to work with the developer to come up with an equitable agreement that will benefit both the developer and the city.
all right, thank you. Commissioner, any questions? Commissioners, any questions?
I have none.
no, I have none.
Yeah, nothing at this time.
Okay. All right, Madam Secretary, are there any communications regarding this item?
There are no communications.
All right, this time I'm gonna open it up to public testimony.
Hello again, it's Keith Middleton. Is this the property that had a brick wall, block wall put up 1 or 2 years ago and then nothing happened to it?
Negative.
No,
Okay, where's this property at then?
This is at the west end.
the west
That's
end,
a-
Oh,
the
what,
east
the
end,
other end?
yeah.
Okay,
This is what they call the cubes?
yes, I
Yeah,
believe
that's-
there's 1 or
that's
2 cubes out there right now.
that's at that circle, that turnaround?
Yeah.
It's-
At the end.
Nothing's going on out there.
Well, that's not, that's not actually where it is. It's, if you, the circle where you're talking about is Lindbergh, the western terminus of Lindbergh, that is actually, Cali Crush's development. They should be getting building permits any day now, but this is about 2 or 3 lots north of that,
2 or 3 lots north, okay, so you
Site.
turn right at that.
correct.
North of Tyson's property, former property,
I believe it's either north or south of that, but it's in the same vicinity.
is it a Mods?
It is a mon.
It is a Mon?
Correct.
Okay, I'm still not really quite sure where it's at, but,
Right here.
You need Google Earth.
It's a few hundred feet north of the runway, but immediately west of the runway,
okay.
on Jameson.
You don't need to go there now.
Jameson runs all the way up to Custody Boulevard.
Yep.
I know it goes past that one on the end, I just didn't know they had anything going
Yep.
north of on Jameson. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'd just like to make one comment.
Sure.
At that turnaround, they've got a trailer out there that's being robbed and trashed and whatnot, it'd be nice to move it,
Or fence it.
clean up the area, fence it or something. But it's a pop-up trailer and all the sides are gone and blowing in the wind. And, it's nice to go out there and have them move the trailer or,
I'm gonna be out there tomorrow for another reason in that area. I'll take a look at it and probably get with code enforcement.
cause it looks pretty trashy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
I have a question of understanding. On these developer agreements, I've heard that they're really important, that we need them. I've heard that we don't have an equitable agreement. I'm wondering about all the prior approvals. Do we have equitable development agreements with everybody else? Because I'm hearing the resident, the principal that said, if I'm gonna be held to this, everybody has to be held to this. So my question is, where are we in our equity in development agreements for everybody in this industry, in this city?
So the reason we're doing development agreements for these specific projects are because they're asking for a little more than other people or other projects are. So normally when you just develop a site, as long as they don't need any special, variances or concessions, then you don't really need a development agreement. There's some right of way issues. The other one, I believe there's an issue with the well, so terminating the well. So because they asked for these special concessions, we draw up a development agreement so as to make it equitable.
And document.
So when we first issued the permits and you had all of that process, you as a generic, I don't know who in the room was there, and we said, what will you be giving to the city? Wouldn't that be something that should be in a development agreement?
Correct.
Yes, and I pointed that out to the city manager. They were unaware that during the interview process that we as a committee asked specifically what they would give back to the city. And it's all, if they still have our notes from those, which they're supposed to, because I think they're supposed to be kept for a period of time. Everybody took down notes, and I know I took down everything everybody said about what they would give to the city. So it's in writing somewhere. It just needs to be found.
I think this is something, and I don't know that yours is the purview where it should be discussed, but in the essence of equity, this is something we really need to look at rather than have it come and bite us.
Thank you. Anybody else?
DJ, just to interpret that a little bit, on the community benefits, on the applications that we worked on, those were detailed and submitted for points. And so there should be a record of that, what was submitted. With respect to development agreements, many times that will take into account the easements, the dedications, the set-asides. Some of that's in the in the
Site plan review.
site plan review.
Yeah, under the conditions we have, we do negotiate similar to a development agreement in those conditions of approval for site plan reviews.
This is a little more extensive, where there might underlined, not necessarily will be, but might be some form of concession. For example, we're going to pave the road after 3 years. That would be a type of an example. Another example that I haven't heard much of is we're going to waive the collection of your tax, for example, because you might pave a larger portion of the road for the community. And so those are examples that you might see, not necessarily will see. And so those can be negotiated in the development agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, not seeing anybody else coming up. Can I get a motion to close public testimony?
I'll make the motion to close public testimony.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
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 All right, so like public hearing number 1, the recommendation is to move this to 19 November. So could I get a motion for that, please?
I'd like to make a motion to move this to November 19th.
I'll second that.
Madam Clerk, Madam Secretary, would you please roll calls?
Commissioner Turnbull,
Yes.
Commissioner Macedonia,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Interim Vice Chair Elms. Yes. Interim Chair Creighton.
Yes. So moved. All right, that does it for the public hearing. We have a discussion item. It's discussion of city-initiated zone changes. At this discussion, we will not make any decisions. We will take public comments, have some back and forth a little bit, and maybe lean towards a direction. So at this time, I'm going to let staff take it over.
So this item was brought to our attention by Mr. DJ Tuig. He would like the city to evaluate the following area noted in the Planning Commission packet. There are 4 parcels highlighted on the staff memo on this project. There's actually only 3 highlighted in the example. However, lot 13 should also be noted that it has already been zone changed to M1. That's that little piece sticking out there off to the east side of this quarter section. Mr. Tuig suggests to square off the land as M1 zoning, so all the rest of the parcels that are between the 4 that have been zone changed already, Mr. Tuig is suggesting to go ahead and do a city-initiated zone change on those parcels in that quarter section. City staff would like to take this opportunity to not only look at Mr. Tuig's suggestion, but also consider other areas that may need to be squared off, if you will. Staff would request input from Planning Commission and the public for additional areas. This item is for discussion only and no action should be taken at this time.
Thank you. You know what, I'm gonna go a little off script here. DJ,
Yes.
go ahead.
Can you put it up? That's quarter section.
Oh, the quarter section? Yeah, 1 second.
I'm gonna give you latitude a lot more than 3 minutes, so.
I think about economic advantages, and that's what drives me. There's property value, obviously, that's impacted. There's land use that is impacted by these decisions. What gives the city the greatest advantage of attracting industry to these sites? And that really drives me in my discussion with you. I mentioned to Chairman Creighton that I got a phone call about some properties that we are marketing for clients, including Big West. And the client said, we want the deal. We're gonna do the project. And the client has met with planning staff, and planning staff has informed me that they've met and that they were going to proceed on the subject property. However, time passed and the client then said, oh shoot, we've been informed we have this setback. And the setback's going to impact us dramatically. We're not able to proceed on this subject property. And I said, well, I made mention of this a long time ago. And I wish the city took action when I made mention of it, because we'd be moving forward with their plans. And so the client said, well, you know, we'll see what happens. And so I just think it's an opportunity to make choices that very well could result in a project on Lindbergh Boulevard. Lindbergh Boulevard, I believe, is the heart of the cannabis zone. I believe power is important. I believe water is important. I think you've seen all the rhetoric that, oh, we don't have power, we don't have water. Well, in fact, there is a power line now on the Radio Road. It came to my client's property all the way down to Mendaburo. It crosses several of our business parks that we have available. And it's right there at Lindbergh now. And so if we can tie off of Lindbergh with power, if we can tie off of Lindbergh with water, we've got a development site there. But we've got to change a portion of that quarter section, which is in your package. John's looking for the package.
Tried to get it on here and it's not.
May I approach the bench with a map?
Hand it to the secretary,
Okay.
she'll get it to us.
Is this it?
Yes.
Oh, we all have that in our package.
Okay, so if I could draw your attention to this, I'll speak to this one first. This is the north quarter section that I've highlighted with the yellow highlights, including the ending tax numbers 36, 37, 38, down the bottom left 21, and then 19, and then 12 have already been zone changed. And so Pepper Williams was one of the first zone changes. That was dash 36, 37. And then below that, dash 21, dash 19, I was the consultant, dash 12. Those subject properties were also zone changed. The transaction pending is the one on dash 19. And so dash 17 is currently zoned ORA. That's where the encroachment is, or the setback. So there's really two ways to do this. And they're both good choices. One choice is that we consider amending the ordinance to define what residential actually is. In my studies, residential is R1, R2, RM2, and existing residential structures. ORA is open space, residential, agricultural, and controlled development. I don't see that as residential. I don't know if you do. But if you do, and that is your vision, I could raise questions with that. I don't see a lot of residential in ORA. And so I say to you, maybe ORA isn't necessary to have a 200-foot setback. That solves the problem for this subject property and many, many others, i.e. many other business parks would be impacted. So from an economic development point of view, the possibility of the easiest fix is a definition of what residential is. That does not exist in the current ordinance. It just says residential. It doesn't say existing residential, it just says residential. To my awareness, it says residential. So therefore, if we say controlled development or ORA does not have a setback, that definition could be made clear in the ordinance. That would help a lot of folks. The other option would be to square off this quarter section. I don't own any of the other properties. The subject property I'll disclose is -19 that I represent the owner. I'm a stakeholder in Big West Corporation. Certainly I have an interest in that subject property. And I'm marketing other properties. So to the clients that are calling us that want to bring businesses, and Sean has met with them, this is a very important choice. This 10 acres possibly could become a development. I just want to also encourage you that it's land use. I'm not aware of any way you can say, well, we'll give it to you if you develop it. I don't believe that's the case. I think it's just a land use choice. And so I would ask you to discuss this quarter section, and then with your permission, Mr. Creighton, I have another area as well. I can continue or I can wait for this discussion.
We were only apprised of this one. If you have another area, we're gonna have to discuss that another time.
He made mention that he would like some suggestions on other areas. I can defer. I can yield, I can wait, I don't care.
You have anything to show?
Yeah, the memo.
All right, let me ask you a question while you're there. So you're asking us to, there are already, if I listen to you correctly, there are already 3, 6, 7 properties that have been rezoned in that
I count
highlighted
6.
area. 6?
I count 6.
Okay, so you want us to initiate a city initiated rezone of this area here?
To my client, only one is necessary, which is -17. But to the planning commission, perhaps you want to
And
square off.
that's east of 19, or is, this is
You are
really
correct.
kind of,
You are correct. It is
east of 19.
it's the easterly boundary, which is a quarter-mile long. On the eastern boundary, -19, I do not own the adjoining property. I have an interest in 19. My client is very interested in developing -19.
And so we do recommend to look at other areas in the city, taking this opportunity to not only look at squaring off this, but other parts of the city as well. So this is in purview.
Okay,
There is a low area. I should also disclose whatever little I know about the area east, it does get low. In other words, there is floodplain property to the east, not
Okay.
immediately to the east, but as you move along.
and that has to be dealt with.
Yeah, they're not gonna develop that. I mean, it's way serious engineering. To my awareness.
Yeah, that's where the city
Okay.
sewer treatment plant is.
At this time, I'm gonna let the commissioners ask any questions they might have, and then I'll open it up to the public.
And just to, sorry, I want to clarify something. The setback, the 200-foot setback, is only for structures. So you can still have a development within 200 feet of residential. You just can't have cannabis processing within that 200 feet.
Right, and the structure has to be 200 foot from the nearest residential structure.
Yes, where the commercial or where the development's being, or where the industrial part is being.
Right.
Well, I think that deserves some clarification because an existing residential versus a controlled development residential, they're two different things entirely. And I I certainly don't believe that's clear. So if staff is making an arbitrary decision, I'm very concerned that staff would interpret the ordinance to mean ORA.
Well, maybe we need to get a clarification on the ordinance, but I believe they're quoting the ordinance pretty well.
Having worked on the ordinance with the city attorney and the city manager at the time, they definitely punt on this.
Okay. I'm gonna let the commissioners ask any questions they have.
All right, in the highlighted it where you got 19 and 20, are them lots combined, or is that two separate lots in there?
19, 21.
20 is a mineral right, 19
Oh.
is the actual parcel.
Okay, cause I can't make it up very well.
Yeah, I can blow it up here, so.
And,
Could you do that? Sean, could you
I
bring it up on the?
tried to bring download the agenda on here, but it said failed, so
Okay.
I don't have a jump drive available to grab it.
I lost my train of thought.
Bring up the email you sent out and then click on that link,
That's true.
and then that will bring it up.
Anybody, well, Commissioner Hogan's trying to chase that on that train.
Yeah.
On
On one of
anybody else
these,
have any questions?
on one of these 10-acre properties with the easements, are you saying they're having a hard time when they have to give up the 200 feet?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That really is the crux.
Is that just on a 10-acre parcel?
Well,
Is
it's
that,
more than one property. You're correct. 10 acres shaped like a noodle is 330 feet across.
right,
So when you give up 200 feet, you've lost a significant portion of your development area. When you go 1,320 feet long, you've lost 200,000 square feet of potential space, floor area.
man, my train of thought keeps.
All right, keep running after that train. Anybody else have any
Yeah.
questions?
DJ, did you say that, 37, 19, 12, and 17 are already zoned?
12, yes. 19, yes. 21 on the corner, yes. That's where the power is. 38 going to the north, 37 and 36, yes, all of those. What is not zone changed is dash 17. And if you go to the top, 11, 27, it looks like 28, 13, 15, and 16. And I'm not recommending all of them. I'm just simply showing you an illustration of what's possible.
Just for your information, there is water on Lindbergh. There's 10-inch water line.
So DJ, the issue is the land you don't wanna have to give up, or
The client is saying, I'm not likely to build on Lindbergh unless there's
because of the front, the setback
a
that is
setback.
required?
That is correct.
And so that's the whole issue regarding this.
Yes,
Okay.
it's a comment that I made here pretty passionately a while ago when there were other priority areas, and I said, this is actually a priority. This really could be a very viable location. We know we're getting a lot of hits on this location. I made testimony that if we squared off this section, this is where the power's coming. This is where the water exists. Some of the other areas don't have anything. This is a prime area. Thank you for your time.
I don't have any questions. I was gonna say it makes sense because it continues on the same.
Well, the
But the
rezone,
only thing,
I agree, the rezone makes sense, but eliminating your setbacks, I think we're gonna have to get more into the ordinance as far as that goes.
right, those are two separate topics and
Yes, they are.
something else that needs to be brought up.
Okay, on the initial setback with the residential, I thought it was 200 feet from the resident's property line to the nearest building?
That is correct.
Okay.
Cannabis building, not building, but
Yeah,
Cannabis.
and residential, I don't believe is defined. If if it includes ORA.
It's currently ORA, correct?
Correct.
And everything in here is OR.
Everything on white in the map is ORA.
Well, in this particular instance, everything east of 19 and north of 13 is ORA.
Excluding 12.
Is there any residents out there?
I don't
Well,
think so.
excluding 12. 12 is already rezoned.
So,
No, there's no,
It's all commercial stuff.
right, the nearest residential, I believe, is a mile away near the high school out there.
so like in this one square that we're looking at, if we would have moved forward with like making it M1 area, you would get away from having to do the 200 foot.
That's correct.
So we wouldn't just section off each lot where they have to struggle in case somebody gets in there. Somebody else were to come.
I'm not recommending anything else other than what I've said, but I will make a comment that I've also seen you do commercial as a way to deal with the setback. And so if you wanted a buffer, those are some of the choices that you have. I'm not making any suggestions. We've brought our cases forward. We've been heard. We've been approved. We're thankful. We're just making suggestions. I think that'll help these applicants and help the city attract the economic development.
Commissioners, any other questions? I'm gonna open it up to the public. Public, anybody wanna talk?
Christy Munt, and I have no horse in this game, so, but I do agree with what EJ is saying. Sorry, EJ. I don't know where that came from. Senior moment. What you're saying about ORA and residential makes a lot of sense. As you said, all of that white is ORA. And how many housing developments do we have knocking down our doors to come and build houses in those areas? So I think that's something we should take under consideration about how the zoning works with ORA compared to residential, actual existing residential homes. So that's just my thought on it. I think we need to do some more research, but I think we have more cannabis industry coming our way than we do home developers. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I guess I'm supposed to address you so you can ask him. Am I understanding correctly that there is a setback in all of this ORA? This 200 feet is existing in that designation?
Well, it says residential. It's not defined for ORA, and that's kind of what we're discussing here, as to whether or not we should exclude ORA from the setback requirements.
Because what I'm hearing in my head is I'm hearing all the times that Matt has said ORA is simply a holding designation.
True.
So I'm really wondering if this is the discussion to agendize, to define residential and what the setbacks are across the board, so that the rules stay the same for everybody. I think we've got some gray area in here that could trip us up.
Well, the rules are set in stone for residential, commercial, and stuff like that. Those setback rules are in stone. They're under ordinance. But where the gray area shows up is with ORA. So what we're trying to determine, well, we're not going to determine it here. We're going to consider it, and we'll probably get some more information from city attorney and city staff, and we'll move forward from there. We're not going to go anywhere with this tonight.
No, but that would be the discussion that could be agendized, that could be brought into alignment with what is in stone, and then there's no more question.
Absolutely.
And then it allows forward
We
movement.
probably have to do an ordinance change to address the setbacks between commercial and M1 and ORA.
Thank you.
If I can offer some clarification, the ordinance really does point to residential, which, like DJ said, is R1 through 5, as well as RM1 and 2. It's pretty vague on whether ORA is considered, because I'm not sure I would consider it residential. I would say just because you can build a house on it doesn't make it residential. For example, the county has agricultural zoning. You can put a farmhouse on an agricultural lot. It doesn't make it residential. And ORA is open space in agriculture. I'd say it's more along the lines of that.
Yeah, but wouldn't we run into a problem in certain housing areas where it's all surrounded by ORA? Now, if you were to change it and that moves everything up to that area, doesn't give certain housing areas developments, we'd have to still have room for each area to grow. We'd have to work with some kind of, be able to allow each community to be able to grow in that housing area. We don't wanna, we change the ORA and then you allow that setback to creep in, it'll push down on them people because all the housing areas are surrounded by OR. So you'd have to give some growth areas to the developments, the home developments, never mind just the business developments.
We could do like a commercial buffer or something.
I mean, yeah, there'd have to be you have existing areas where, your homes are. You don't wanna, even though it's OR, if you alleviate that buffer zone for ORA, then that would push them right up towards the house without room for them areas to grow, to build more homes in them communities.
Okay, but I would ask you this question, where are the communities?
Well, I mean, you look at, take my area for out there.
No, I mean,
Well,
seriously,
certainly.
seriously.
I mean, even if you're out there like Mendenboro, as they creep in, now all that land that's developing is coming in. If you open up all that area for the OR, then that allow these growths to get closer to your homes.
We do need to, other cities have set boundaries on where M1 and M2 will be, and it won't be in any other places. We have scattered ours out or moved ours out into other areas, beneficial to both the city and to the cannabis industry. There will be, well, as long as I'm involved in this, I'm willing to set hard limits on how far we will go, east, west, north, or south. But where am I going with this? I think I gotta chase that same train. But back to my first question, and I wasn't trying to be sarcastic, I wasn't trying to be funny about it, but there aren't really a lot of communities being developed within the city limits, or the 203 square miles we have as a city. Near my house, there's only 2 new houses going up.
Yeah, the whole thing is as we grow and this industry brings people, we're hoping they're gonna build homes here. We're hopefully, even if we get 10 manufacturers up and going, and we're there limited, because everything chases the water and power, regardless. But you gotta leave some room for the houses to grow with the water and power. You can't put the lone guy out there in the middle of nowhere, because that's the only thing he can get that has service. We still have to allow some room for a few of these communities to have area to grow, because that's where the power is.
So I have a question for Commissioner Holt. What is your concern?
Well, taking everything away from,
To protect the residents?
to protect the residents that
There's no
they're,
residents out there.
yeah.
I think that's the point Jim is trying to make. There's nothing out there. It's all commercial.
What is it? Well,
You're saying that.
like in my area, if you brought it up to there,
Approach upon that?
yeah, like if you would say we're to open up in my area, I'm just gonna use that for an example because I'm more familiar with the areas. You could take that and change that zoning all the way up to the road that blocks in that one neighborhood. You could have it all the way right up and it would put it right on them people's doorstep.
Yeah, but you
And
have to go
that's-
through the whole process.
And that area where people do like to live out there, there won't be anywhere for them to go. All the businesses will eat up all that area out there because they have the water and the power is right there. But you couldn't grow, you wouldn't be able to build any homes. That community would never expand
Because they'd be too close to the
because
marijuana?
the marijuana would box them in. Because from the road surrounding me, you could box that whole community in,
So that's something to think about.
theoretically. I mean, you know, it might be in a long time from now, I'm not saying today, but we're supposed to still plan for things that
The future.
to 20 years when our kids and our grandkids are here. And I do have kids and grandkids. But if you were to move the OR all the way up to our boundaries, you would block that community.
I'll have to get some
I mean,
clarification.
theoretically, you could. Whether that happens because you have all that space may never happen. But you still have to keep in mind, you could shut that whole, around me, I could have a whole block wall.
So, just,
I mean, theoretically, I'm just saying.
I have to check with the attorney, but I believe that setback only goes one way. So it might have to be grandfathered in, but you could put houses next to a cannabis development. If the cannabis development's already built, you just can't build the cannabis development within 200 feet of that zone, as of now with 404RA. At least that's the way we've
I
interpreted
understand what you're
it.
saying.
Okay. well, Up for discussion for another day.
I'd like to answer you.
Go ahead.
Hank, Keith first.
Go ahead.
Take a number.
I just want to mention we've got over 50,000 properties out there. We'd have to put in hundreds of M1 cannabis businesses to wrap around anything out there that's housing. I'm more than 3 miles away from the airport myself, and I think we're getting out of range on this. We're not gonna wrap cannabis around the housing no matter what we do. And if we ever get cannabis moving towards housing, we're gonna have these discussions again for what we're gonna zone, how we're gonna zone it, all over. So I think we're just getting carried away with this.
Can you briefly answer his question?
I can. Thank you for the latitude. I'm very reluctant to support cannabis near the high school. Right? I think that's encroachment to me.
That
Over
block,
controls.
you mean like that block
Absolutely.
area?
And so I'm very concerned. How you control this, Commissioner Hogan, is you discern who you give the M1. What properties get M1? That's the land use control right there. That's the police power. By law, that's the police power. You can't go beyond this point, sir. Does that make sense?
Right.
So then, as a commission, you allow the, beyond that, to be your buffer. And that's how you control that. You have the control. You actually have the control. And you exercise that control each time you get an application.
Well, and here goes to one of your points that you made. Having some of these committees to sit down and thrash out a few of these areas. I mean, to take in the more consideration of what's going on, you know. But
Vision
I mean,
planning.
yeah, it needs to have some workshops. I believe you're right on the ball there. I'd like to see a little more. But another day.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, Sean, you said that there were other areas you wanted to consider?
Staff would just like planning commission to discuss any other areas they might consider squaring off. So, for example, down here, there's been several, kind of, it's not spot zoning technically, but you can see it's a little patchwork of M1 zones. So, option could be possibly do a zone change to M1 along Mindaburu right here, and then you would square this off where there's going to be a future line. I mean, there's already M1 on either side of Mindaburu, and then you could put commercial down here as a buffer or open space or something else. But that's just an example. We'd like you to maybe discuss, similar to the discussion on the cannabis clusters on where we want to see, since we've had zone changes up here, the one down by 58, so it's open discussion.
Okay, anybody have anything? I'm gonna make a proposal for the commission to consider.
I just want to say, I think that maybe the best, action might be for the commission to present to the city council that there could be zones only for cannabis, and then Mr. Hogan doesn't have to be concerned about cannabis encroaching upon residential. So like we've done at the airport, where we know we have a fairly substantial sized cannabis only, they're not gonna be growing cannabis next to anybody who's living out there. So I don't know if that's a possibility to recommend that there could be cannabis zones around the city, and until we decide that there would be more, just limit it to that 10 or whatever. Just a thought.
I agree.
I agree.
I do agree with that. What I was going to propose was, since we're not going to make any decisions tonight, several things I'd like to propose that we direct staff to do. First and foremost, find out if we can eliminate setbacks for cannabis at ORA, or somehow mitigate. Maybe not eliminate, but maybe lessen them. I don't know.
On a case by case type thing?
Hang on, because it may all fall together. Secondly, bring back all of our clusters that we have now in better detail, so that we can look at them and maybe define some lines and propose that to council. And M1/cannabis will only be allowed in those areas until it's saturated. And then once it's saturated, we can look at something else. Because you need utilities in order for everything to happen, okay? A lot of the areas, they don't have anything. So the areas that we're working now have at least something nearby where they can actually install it. They can do other things for power, septic. They can dig a well that they can abandon once they do get water. So if the areas that are clustered right now, bring back in more detailed fashion. And then we will have another discussion on maybe setting up some hard lines. And if we get some definitive responses from the city attorney regarding the setbacks on ORA, we may find ourselves moving forward to a point. I think does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So that's, if we're in agreement, that's the direction we'll point you.
I'd like to add also, if I may.
Sure.
Also add that the conversation that we had with, city council, they also gave some parameters as well as what they were comfortable seeing. So if we can pull all of that together, that way we have their support.
Yeah, what I remember from that meeting is they were happy with where these cannabis, where the clusters are currently forming, but they don't really want to go out any further from now unless it's more farther away from the city center.
Well, they were still talking out there by 58 though, right?
Right now.
Wait, we were talking about opening up there because there was power there supposedly.
Yeah.
Accessible.
Okay, let's put this one to bed. Okay, moving on to commissioner items and comments. This portion of the meeting is reserved for planning commissioners to present information, announcements, and items that have come to their attention. Short staff responses may be appropriate. The planning commission will take no formal action. A planning commissioner may request to calendar an item for consideration at a future meeting or refer an item to staff. Starting with Commissioner Macedonio.
I have nothing right now.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hogan, I'm bouncing back and forth only because the way it's on my paper.
The city had their going out going out of town. They had their graders out. If we could get them to come through out there in Wonder Acres, they're kind of being overtaken on the roads with tumbleweeds. You know, do the same kind of cleanup they did on the road here. I would have liked to seen them follow through with the neighborhood over there. They're between the middle road and everything else.
You're spinning your wheels, they won't do it. They don't have the personnel every time. You should look at my neighborhood, it's crazy.
Just have them drop the grader off. I ran a grader for Borax for dozens of years, so
I'll mention it to interim public works director Barry.
If they just happen to leave it there for the night, I could probably do it.
You want some asphalt, to have a big pile of asphalt?
I can do that too.
Anything else?
No, that'd be it.
Commissioner Trumbull.
I was listening to DJ. I think we should arrange to have another workshop between the planning commission and the city council and the, real estate people.
Chamber of Commerce.
Real estate people should be involved in this. The workshop that we did have was very, very good, and we had a lot of problems solved. The city is changing a lot. We're gonna have a new police chief, and we're gonna have. I read in the paper also that the county was talking about stopping, canceling any marijuana shops that sold marijuana. And that would be detrimental to us if that went through.
No, that wouldn't be really, because the city doesn't have to go by the county rules.
I think that
So
was
that would actually be beneficial to the city.
Yeah.
And more sales.
That's why I voted no on that proposition.
But, I don't know that the city council was real, up with the idea of meeting with the planning commission, and then it was like almost an inconvenience for them. So I think it, like, Ron said, it was, I think, productive. I think a lot of stuff came out, but whether they took it to heart, I don't know.
Commissioner Trumbull, do you have anything else?
No, I haven't.
All right. Thank you, sir. Commissioner Elms.
I don't have anything.
Wow.
You guys are fine.
I got a couple of things, and I wanna get out of here, cause it's halftime. A sour note, or not sour, but a sad note. If anybody doesn't know, Pastor Belton, who was a long time pastor at all of our meetings, both commission and council, passed away this weekend. I don't think that anything's been announced for his services yet, so keep your ear out for that. Karen had talked about minutes from the directors meeting being presented to us and then moved up to council. Might not be a bad idea, especially in your monthly report to council, and then maybe as a short discussion item for us here. Because I'm not always able to attend. As a matter of fact, I haven't been to any of them yet. But it would be, if there are minutes taken, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
are they published anywhere?
They're approved, normally during normal planning commission meetings. They wouldn't have normally been approved at the last planning commission meeting, however, we were, kind of surprised that we still had to have it, even though we were having a special meeting, so we had to throw together a quick thing for last week. However, they will be approved at the next planning.
No, I'm not
commission.
talking about our minutes. I'm talking about directors meeting, the directors.
Okay, no, there aren't any there are no meetings currently taken at those.
Are there official results that are
Yes.
annotated?
So those,
Codified somewhere?
yeah, so those meetings come out with conditions, those are called conditions of approval, and that's the agreement between the city staff and the developer of what they need to, do before we give them an occupancy permit. So, and those are signed by the director, Matthew Alexander, and that's what comes out of those meetings. So really, the meeting is a negotiation of what those conditions will be.
Okay. Any way we could have those as, information items for us?
Absolutely.
Okay,
And they're actually public record.
okay.
So if you want to request those in your packet after every one, we can absolutely do that.
Okay, great. You got that video that I sent you on Cal City to promote it?
Yes.
What did I ask you to do with that?
think you mentioned.
Dude, I'm enthusiastic.
You may possibly
What's
putting
the
it on the
matter,
website.
Jim?
You want it on the website,
Having a boogie.
That's what you suggest putting it on the website,
so that we can
or possibly,
help to promote the city.
yeah, the economic development, and that's one with, Erwood, correct, that she did.
There were two out there, and the one, actually was done by Norm Hill, if I'm not mistaken. He did the one with the drone flying over and everything. It was very well done. It really was very well done. I think it was 6 minutes or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple, I think that they're actually through, I'm not sure if it's the EDC.
I think that's when Norm was with the EDC.
Yeah, so they're on YouTube somehow or somewhere. They're fairly actually.
Yeah, just
type in-
on YouTube, just search
Yeah.
Cal City,
exactly.
California City.
There's like
Northwest.
50,000 views on it, so people are watching it.
Yeah.
And that's quite a few.
And finally, there was a rumor that I'm vacating this position. Not true. I'm here, my application's in, same as Commissioner Elms, to be reappointed. Our appointments lapsed in July, so we are interim chair and vice chair. But I believe not tomorrow, the next council meeting, we should be,
Officially sworn in.
well, maybe, yeah, we'll see what happens. They're gonna vote up or down, so,
Have you been interviewed?
no.
Somebody will
Oh,
sort it
they have not. As a matter of fact, they think they want the interview process in open session. Don't ask me why. It's something they want more transparency for themselves. So, it's something that came out of, a council meeting not too long ago. So, by next council meeting, we should hopefully be reappointed,
You will be.
okay? If there's nothing else, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion that we adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. See you, folks. Please don't block the door on my way out.
It's heavier though.